figure it out. Yeah, I got it. I understand it. You know, Jesus taught into some very simple terms. Sometimes we complicate stuff a lot, don't we? We just make mountains out of molehills, as they say. But you know, God created this earth, and we just read from Job chapter 12 that every living thing's in his hand. His ways are not our ways. We're going to look at a couple of scriptures today. Oh, by the way, I was talking a little story. I was talking with a sister earlier about a story about a little young man who came to church. He'd never been to the church before. The elder brought him in, and the song leader got up and raised his hand. And the little boy said, "What does that mean?" He says, "We're getting ready to lead a song." Then the preacher got up, took his watch off, set it down like this, and he said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Absolutely nothing." But I promise you, we'll keep this as brief as we can. So you think you're wise. We all think we're wise. Even the beast of the earth. Jesus taught in simple terms, parables. Some people could hear them, some people couldn't hear them. The man or the woman that has the open heart could hear them. But many today still don't do that because the hardness of their hearts. Next slide, please. In fact, go on to 2, please. One more. Thank you. How often do we say to ourselves, "I trust in the Lord"? But yet when we look at our actions and our thoughts, do we really trust in the Lord? I was talking with a brother yesterday who had just been laid off. I could tell he trusted in the Lord. He wasn't concerned what was going to happen in the long run because he knew the Lord was going to take care of it. Do we have that thought in our mind? Do we really? You know, we talk about how baptism is not a work of man, and it's not. We talk about how we're not about works, but yet our thoughts and our actions are work-based, and we actually think that we are the ones in control. I'm there sometimes. I fight that. I'm not in control, but yet we act like we are, even with our thoughts. Our self-willed actions, work and merit. We play Christianity or we play church. Do you really believe? Do you believe in all your heart that there is a God beyond this creation? Most people would say, "Of course I do." Do your actions and your thoughts manifest that? And how we behave? Is our sole focus on the things of this earth? We've been talking about this in the Fishers of Men class downstairs. The spiritual and physical creation. How do your thoughts and your actions look to those on the outside? Our young people here, don't think that your thoughts and your actions aren't being scrutinized. And it's not by me and it's not by God, although He is watching. The little ones are always watching. The best testament to me to try to keep me doing what's right is my children. They know when Dad gets angry, when he shouldn't. They keep you in check, don't they? How are your thoughts today? Are you playing church? Do we think Matthew 7:22 doesn't talk about us? Anybody remember Matthew 7:22? Many will say unto me in that day, "Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not do all these great things in your name?" And what did Jesus tell them? "Depart from me, I never knew you." We can say anything we want, but do our thoughts and our actions reflect the life that Jesus would have us to have? Next slide, please. It's amazing to me the simplicity of Christianity. You ever thought about that? We talked about this in our Sunday morning class also. Baptism. Being immersed in water, but every sin that you have committed in the past is forgiven. How simple is that? We talked about Naaman. He was told to go dunk in the Jordan how many times, young people? 7. 7 times. And he fought it tooth and nail because he didn't want to go dunk in that dirty old Jordan River. Mentioned this morning that if someone offered you $10 million and said all you have to do is drive down to the Sam's Club down here and pick it up, how many of us would say, I want the $10 million, but you know what? I am not going to drive down there. Isn't that the attitude we have sometimes with God? I know I've been there. 3 fingers pointing at me as 1 finger points out. Isn't that the attitude that we have sometimes? My way or the highway? But that's the case. It's so simple, but yet we make mountains out of molehills. Our life is so simple, but yet sometimes it's hard to live. And I'm not going to tell you that it's just all just roses. It's not. In fact, if you're not suffering, as Matt has taught many times in the last Sundays, you're not living the Christian life. If people don't make fun of you, and there are people out there that will. I work in the science community, and I'll tell you right now, belief in God, forget creation in 7 days. Belief in God, that'll get you a good sticker. They'll laugh you right out of the room. Which is funny because some of the greatest scientists that all their work's based off of were believers in the Bible. But you can't talk to them because their wisdom is beyond God's, at least in their mind it is. How simple is it? Jesus said what? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's it. Do we? I know sometimes I don't. I should. Do we do unto others? Do we treat others? Even when they treat us terrible. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's the neighbor, that you don't get along with. The bottom line is, if you treat them the way Jesus said to treat them, what's going to happen? You're going to win them over, or you're going to heap coals of fire on their head, it's on them at that point. Complicated. Next slide, please. We tend to make everything so complicated when it's really not. Jesus taught his followers in parables that we just mentioned. I've listed 4 up here. The parable of the seeds or the tares. Everybody remember that one? What was it? The seed fell onto the 4 types of ground. Right? And Jesus was referring to that as the hearts of men. How well people would receive it. He also taught the barren fig tree, which is we're talking about walking the Christian life. If a Christian is not producing fruit, what is going to happen to that Christian? Just like the barren fig tree. It's going to be cast into the fire. Parable of the lost sheep, one of my favorites. Jesus forsook, in the sense of not total forsaking, but put aside the 99 to go find the one. That one was me. That one was you. That he went. The parable of the builders. Jesus used natural things around us to teach us. What was the parable of the builders? Little children. The wise man built his house on the what? The rock. He built his house on the rock, did he not? And the foolish man built his house on the sand, which is nothing more than a figurative way of saying on his own wisdom. And yet we do that today. We save up for this, we save up for that. What are you saving up for heaven? I just had to buy a new car. And, we like it. It's nice to have things. I don't like the car payment, but we like it. But the question is, having things is not wrong. But do things have you? Do they have me? That's what Jesus is trying to get. Simple parables about plants growing, people building things. Simple stuff, not complicated theology that you hear about and learning Koine Greek and the whole 9 yards. Simple stuff. Well, just when I think that all the stories that Jesus would have taught, of course he lived back in that time, right, are in the Bible, I believe God still teaches us simple things in nature today. All we have to do is open our minds and look. And one of those events occurred not recently. Next slide, please. He reaches us through his creation. God's taught me many things. I thought, like some young people here, I was going to be a football player. I was going to go beyond college. And God had a different plan for me. But he may have that plan for you. I don't know. God had a totally different plan for me than what I thought. Now, that doesn't mean you don't prepare and you don't do hard work, because you need to prepare yourself for a family to take care of them. Doesn't mean those things are wrong. But where are our priorities? God reset mine. He's done that a couple times in my life. I don't know about you. But the question is, are you letting God reset your priorities? Now, I'm not talking that God gives us new revelation beyond the Word. What I'm talking about is He's still teaching us the same principles that Jesus taught in the parables. And I think this is one of them at the bottom of the screen if you can read it. My wife she's actually from Arkansas, but she grew up mainly in the Sevierville, Tennessee area. How many of you guys heard about the fires? Everybody's pretty much heard about the fires? Most people have. It was pretty horrific. Go to the next slide, please. Left side, I got that right. Left side shows the fires. This was probably a $10 or $20 million building complex. Tons of money went into it. People were there all the time. And now I'm kind of local, so I get to complain. Why are those people here? Get off the road. But no. They're building just glamorous buildings there. But look in the background. What's coming? Who's ever been around a bad fire before? I don't know if you've ever been around one like this. The local people there said that the fire was spreading so fast it was like waters in a flash flood. Can you imagine that? People had less than 20 seconds to get to safety, and many didn't. The right side shows what was left over after that. Temperatures reach, go to the next slide, please, nearly 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Is that hot? Sure is. The aluminum alloy wheels on the axles of the cars, it was so hot, melted off. Rubber was long gone before that. And this is just a small tidbit of that. Go to the next slide, please. Jesus said, consider the lilies of the field. I'm going to ask you today, consider a young individual that I learned about named Charles Holmes. He lives up there, and he survived the fire, by the way, but he lives up there. He stayed to protect his family. He was a very big individual. He couldn't fit in the car with all the other kids, and so what did he have to do? He had to stay back so that they could be saved. He didn't complain, and he thought it was his duty to save others. His brothers and his sisters, his mom and his dad, they were all terribly sad that they couldn't take him with them. But they got a phone call after the fires were out and learned that he was still alive. But you see, my friends, Charles had something that we have, but because we like to choose our way, we typically are not going to survive if we do that. Charles had survival skills. I want to introduce you to Charles. Next slide, please. There's Charles Holmes. He is a pot-belly pig from Vietnam, I guess. Although I will tell people that big things grow in Tennessee, not just Texas. And Jeremy, don't get any ideas about this, okay? This pig, ladies and gentlemen, had the intuition to bury himself in the dirt and survive fires that were in excess of 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Within 2 yards of this pig's skin, alloy aluminum wheels melted. Now you tell me, is there a God? Every bit of creation is in his hands. Yet this pig had the smarts to survive that fire by the information or the instinct that God had given him. But boy, we're not as smart as a pig sometimes, are we? We keep fighting and fighting against God. My way or the highway. God's been telling us. He's telling us in this story. He told me. Consider the foxes. Consider the sparrows, that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Wow. Next slide, please. So are you as wise as Charles? Not if you worry about earthly things. Are you as wise as Charles? Not if you think you're going to go on Judgment Day up to the Lord and argue your case. We discussed this also in our class this morning. Judgment Day is not about a trial, brethren. It's sentencing day. That word in the Greek does not mean that there's going to be a big trial. It means that there is going to be a yea or nay. Either Jesus is going to say, "Well done, good and faithful servant," or he's not. But if you think you're going to argue your case, I think you got another thing coming, because you're not as wise as Charles. Are you as wise as Charles? You think that one day I'll straighten up, one day I'll quit doing that. And I'm not here saying that we're perfect and we'll never do something again, but if we continue to do the same things over and over, brethren, that is not walking in the light. God has said He has given us a way out of every temptation. God is not a liar. As I preached on a Sunday night long ago, we can do better. We're not perfect. We never will be. This is a recovery group. I love that. You know, we are. But we can do better. You're going to sit there in the pew. Maybe you've never obeyed the gospel. I remember when I was younger. Going to white-knuckle the pew till you're 70, till you're 80. There's not going to be no white-knuckling the pew, brethren, when you're gone. It's going to be sentencing day. Sad to say. Luke 12. If you got your Bibles, turn over to Luke 12. I've also got on the board. Next slide, please. Luke chapter 12. We're going to read just a few of these verses, although it's a pretty lengthy reading. Luke chapter 12. This is the King James. In the meantime, they were gathered together an innumerable multitude of people, insomuch that they trode upon one another. And he, referring to Jesus, began to say unto his disciples, first of all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. You know, I used to think, beware of the leaven of the false teachers, of other people. Beware of your own leaven. Beware of that leaven that says, I am smarter than God. Oh, you don't say it explicitly, but your actions and your thoughts reveal it. And we all struggle with that. For there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, neither hid that shall not be known. Therefore, whatsoever ye have spoken in darkness, shall it be heard in the light. And that which ye have spoken in the ear, it closes, shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. And Jesus goes on to talk about not fearing the one that can destroy the body, but destroy the body in both soul and hell. Look at verse 7 or 6. Are not 5 sparrows sold to 2 farthings, and not one of them is forgotten before God? But even the very hairs of your head are numbered. Fear not, therefore, ye are all more valuable than the sparrows. Next slide, please. Notice in red, he said unto them, take heed, beware of the covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not of abundance of the things which he possesseth. Talking with Matt and some other preachers down through the years, they said that the number one problem that we have in this world is worldliness. Things. Once again, we ask, do things have you? Next slide, please. Consider the ravens. Once again, Jesus getting just right down into the dirt. I love it. Consider the ravens, for they neither sow nor they reap, neither have a storehouse nor a barn. And remember what he taught earlier in those verses, if you go back and read it. He was talking about the man who built all the barns and stored everything up, and how much had he stored up for heaven? 0. And Jesus is now saying, look at the birds of the air. God feeds them. Aren't you better than that? But God gave us one thing that we talked about this morning in class. It's the greatest thing, but it's also, in some cases, our demise. He gave us choice. Because a lot of times we choose ourselves over God. Consider the lilies, how they grow. I love this. We even have a song about this. They toil not, they don't spin. But yet Solomon was not arrayed like one of these. But all these things do the nations of the world seek after. But your Father knows what you have and what you need to be provided. Next slide, please. Question today for you. Are you basing your life on your own wisdom? When you think you're not, that's when you really need to have retrospect. I used to think the same thing. But yet when you start reading the Scripture, the simplicity of the things that we care, what are your thoughts, what are your actions, I realized very quickly that I wasn't any smarter than Charles. In fact, I was dumber than a pig. Seems harsh, doesn't it? But it's a lesson from today. God took care of Charles. He instilled in him the instinct to survive the fires which some people compare to hell on earth. Quote unquote. But yet we have choice, and yet our instinct for some reason just seems to be, I'm not going to escape the fires of hell. I'm going to continue to live the way I want to live, and not live the way that Jesus would have me live. Consider the lilies. Consider the ravens. Consider the sparrows. Consider the foxes. And now I say, consider the pot-bellied pig. Seems like maybe a modern-day parable. If Jesus walked the earth at this time, maybe he would have taught us things based off of what we see today. Simple stories, not something elaborate. You know today whether or not you're walking the way God wants you to walk. That's the bottom line. We all do. No one else. People can see what's on the outside. People can see certain actions, but no one knows all your thoughts. You and God know those thoughts. Brother Odell's going to sing a song here in a minute, and I want you to think about that. Where is your wisdom based? Does it come from God? Or is your wisdom coming from yourself? Because if your wisdom's coming from yourself, just as simple as we teach our young people, and by the way, the wise man building his house upon the rock and the foolish man, that's not a story for children, brethren. That's a story for every one of us. Because if your wisdom is based upon your own thinking and your own understanding, even though you go through the actions of playing church and playing Christianity, you're like the foolish man. You're not even as smart as Charles. 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And yet a pot-bellied pig was smart enough to bury himself and escape the fires of destruction. The question today is, are you smart enough to escape the fires of destruction? Fear not the one that can destroy your body, but fear the one that can destroy both your body and soul in hell. It's a scary thought, but it should be a sobering thought for every one of us. We're getting ready to extend the Lord's invitation. It's simple. Joey's going to lead us in a song, and all you have to do is come up with a good conscience and be baptized in the waters, and God will forgive every sin that you've committed. Can't be any simpler. If you're walking in the light, but you've fallen and you didn't get back up, and you need the prayers of the church, it's simple. You come up front if you need to be, you pray to the Lord with us, and God will forgive every sin. That's more simple than driving to Walmart. Think about that as we stand and we sing the invitation song.